Y yo soy de la Asociación del Síndrome de Down o Down Syndrome. Gracias por unirse hoy. Mi nombre es Sandra Banker de la...
Fatima, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm Fatima Castañeda, and I am with Family Focus Resource Center, and we're happy to have you here. And we're doing this in collaboration with Sandra, the Down Syndrome Association, and also with our presenters that, it's going to be now their turn to present themselves.
It's a pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today. They come from Vanaman, German. They have a successful history providing assistance to children with disabilities and families for over 40 years. Dina Kaplan has been practicing law for more than 40 years. And she has an extensive litigation background and has been protecting the rights of children with disabilities for the past 25 years. David German, over the past decade, David has established himself as one of the most effective, knowledgeable, and compassionate attorneys working for students with disabilities and their families. He has successfully represented hundreds of families through California in special education due process. I wanted to also let you know that this is for those Spanish-speaking families. This session is usually for our Spanish-speaking group. It's called Cultivar y Crecer. This group has been around for over 25 years. So when I started the group was already in existence, and I met a lot of young families, and Fatima was one of them. She's one of the people that welcomed me into this community. Well, thank you so much. And Dina and David, thank you for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Did you want to start, David, or do you want me to?
Why don't you go ahead and take it away, and we'll get moving from there.
Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so hi everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Sandra. Those of you who know me also know that I'm the parent of a now 27-year-old who's got multiple physical, developmental, mental health challenges. So I have lived everything that you're going through and more. So Sandra, can you do the next slide, please? One thing we want to tell everybody tonight is that things are changing extremely rapidly. We are getting new information minute by minute, and it seems like everybody's doing things a little bit differently, and every school district's doing things a little bit differently. So what we're bringing for you tonight is what we know up to the minute, and just keep, like I said on the slide, just check back on the websites that we've listed for up to the date information. Okay, next slide. So what are the school district's legal obligations? And nothing has really changed with regard to the district's obligation under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to provide students that are eligible with a free, appropriate public education. And I'm just going to go over a little bit of history. Some of you already know this. For those of you, it'll be a repeat. But I think it's important to note that in March of 2017, the United States Supreme Court, in the case of Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District, held that schools are required under IDEA to provide students with an education that's reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances, and emphasize that every child should have the chance to meet challenging objectives. This was a very important case because in theory, it raised the standard that had been a very low standard for many years. What we're finding is it's not as helpful as we thought it might be. And I can talk about that in a little while. Go ahead, Sandra. Can I control the slides, or you have to do it? Anyway, okay.
Only way, hold on a second, let me see if If I know David did it last time we did a presentation. Did you want me to send the slides to David maybe, or?
Well, that's okay, as long as you can keep switching, that's no problem.
Just let me know.
Okay, so let me just talk a little bit more about school districts' legal obligations. And so what is the free appropriate public education for each student is going to be based on his or her assessed needs. And students are assessed initially to determine their eligibility and then reassessed every 3 years to determine the student's continued eligibility. The individualized education program sets forth the student's present levels of performance, goals and objectives based on present levels, placement, accommodations, modifications, services, and supports. I know most of you have students and children with an IEP, but sometimes it helps to go over what the requirements are and review those. So IEPs are reviewed annually to determine the student's progress toward their goals and for the team to make an offer of a free appropriate public education. Go ahead, Sandra. So what we know for sure is that the federal law has not changed under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The state law that allowed an exemption of time to conduct assessments to districts at the beginning of the pandemic, that extension ended on July 1st of 2020. And so there are no more extensions with regard to assessments and holding IEP meetings. So the big question is, what is your district doing or not doing? Next slide. David, you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of variation in terms of what schools are doing with respect to testing and mask requirements for in-person instruction. They actually have a lot of discretion about how each district has a lot of discretion about how it's going to keep kids and people who work in schools safe. So most schools are requiring students to wear masks while on campus, and many schools are also requiring testing, although that varies widely. Because many students with significant disability-related challenges are unable to wear masks and are also, because of sensory needs, often unable to tolerate being tested, school districts are obligated to make accommodations so that students are not denied access to in-person learning. That said, while districts do have an obligation to make accommodations, obviously not every student is going to be safe returning to campus, given what's been going on lately. And a lot of parents have made a decision that their child needs to continue to receive instruction, some kind of distance learning program, in order to access their education, because it's just safer until things calm down with the pandemic. So there's a couple options that districts have to make available. Sandra, if you could switch to the next. Oh, great, thanks. So the first one, so basically, when the pandemic started, everyone knows there was chaos for the first few months. The end of the school year in spring of 2020 was really difficult and really hard for students to access online instruction, and a lot of students really struggled. People continued to struggle during last school year, but at least districts had worked out some kind of meaningful program, and for many students, they'd figured out a way to create a meaningful distance learning program that had some activities and had some supports and services, and it was a little better because they kind of I don't know if it's because they figured out how to do it or why, but the state legislature decided that they were going to stop using that system at all. So districts are no longer required to provide the type of distance learning instruction from the home school that the student was attending with regular teachers. They have to provide, all schools have to provide some distance learning option, but they don't have to do it in the way they were doing it last year, where you stay completely attached to your own school and your own teacher. Now, the state law, which passed just in July, requires school districts to make distance learning options available only through independent study programs. And that's a very different type of program than what was previously available. So LAUSD offers, which is, I assume many people here have their students enrolled in LAUSD. LAUSD is offering its program through City of Angels, which was previously a K through 12, like kindergarten through 12th grade independent study program, which students, it was almost all students without disabilities, because the students had to be able to work significant amount of time on their own, and for their program to be very self-directed. Now, and that school was previously for all 13 grades, kindergarten through 12th grade, it was previously had about 1,200 to 1,500 students. They were planning for an influx of students. So the school was planning that they would have up to 4,000 students this year, and was trying to hire based on that projection. As of last week, they had over 12,000 students enrolled. So many, many more families have chosen that option than they expected. And I think that probably has a lot to do with how the pandemic kept getting worse again towards the end of the summer. My understanding from a recent meeting at the district a couple of days ago is that there were still over 2,000 IEPs that had yet to be convened for City of Angels students. So they're horribly behind. And something many of you may have experienced is that they're also absolutely unable to call people back. So even students who have been placed in City of Angels through an IEP have been having a very difficult time reaching the school.
David, can I jump in here for a second?
Go ahead.
I do want to say that City of Angels and some of the other independent study programs offered by other school districts, parents are asking us all kinds of questions about whether their students are going to continue to receive their services like OT and speech, and also if they have behavior intervention implementation services, the behavioral one-on-one, either from the school district or the NPA. And there's all kinds of different answers. And I haven't gotten a uniformity of answer yet with regard to those questions. So I'm interested to know if other parents have been told that they were going to get their services or not. What I have been told through some of my clients is that if they sign up for City of Angels, that their homeschool will provide their services in some form or another, virtually is what I'm understanding. But what I'm also understanding is that they won't be provided with their non-public agency BII and BID services.
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing, so when people have been signing up you have to have an IEP to be placed in City of Angels if you're a student who has an IEP. And what we've been hearing kind of across the board is that schools within LAUSD, and this is roughly the case with other districts, schools have been saying that the on-campus people who were supposed to provide supplemental services like speech or occupational therapy will continue to provide those either in person on campus, if the student's spending most of their time at home but will come to campus, or on the computer. So those services still seem like they're available, but for every IEP team I have heard of placing a child at City of Angels, they have all stated that they will no longer provide online behavioral support services. So no, they're not going to provide online aids, and they're also not going to provide resource support services. So those hours, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to interrupt for one quick second. Somebody posted that they were confused. They didn't know what City of Angels was. And just so you know, City of Angels is the independent study program that LA Unified has come up with, but every school district in the state is required to come up with a means of independent study for students who are opting not to return to school in person. Okay.
Although I know that many people whose students had a behavioral aid had a very hard time gaining benefit from having an online behavioral aid last year. And it's kind of strange after having spent a year telling the district, you know, please provide in-person services for behavioral support. This is worthless to my client. I'm now in the position of going and asking for people, hey, we need online behavioral supports so that students can access their online programs. City of Angels was previously almost completely directed by the student and their family. It was a school where you were kind of given assignments and you took them home, and there was very little direct instruction. They have started changing how they're going to do direct instruction based on the age of the student. So early elementary, late elementary, and middle school and high school have different requirements. The younger students have more direct instruction, but it's still going to require a lot of independence, and there's not a lot of hours with a teacher. So I don't know. I think we're at the next slide. There are some requirements on the next. Right. Some requirements. This is what students are supposed to be able to do. Work independently to complete assignments, work without daily supervision, access the district, the core curriculum. And so in order to access the independent study program through City of Angels, typically, this is what students are supposed to be able to do. In fact, my understanding is that pretty much the district is they're having IEPs saying we're going to determine whether your student can benefit from it, but they're finding almost any student eligible for it, even if it would be very difficult. So families that we really want to talk to a lot, because I think they're put in a horrible position, is families that have an IEP meeting to discuss an option to have a distance learning option. And the IEP team says to them, well, we've offered you a program at school and that's appropriate, but we do not believe that your student can benefit from an online option. And so they leave you in a position where your only option is to attend the in-person program. So that, I think that is happening sometimes, but we're trying to hear from families that are in that position. Dina, do you want to do the next one?
Sure. Sandra, you want to change slides? Okay. Well, we've kind of been talking about this. The requirement is to have an IEP meeting in order to determine if independent study is appropriate. And then, like we were saying, the related services may not be available to a student, excuse me, in independent study, or may not be available in the same amount at the same school. It's pretty much a mess. Students may not be provided with their non-public agency services, like I said, and even if they are provided with non-public agency services, one of the questions that's come up is how much time the non-public agency aide can stay with the student. Is it only during live instruction, or can the non-public agency aide continue to assist the student during asynchronous time, which is not being supervised by a teacher? So that's a big question. And we, like David just said, we don't know what options there are for students who can't participate in independent study and can't return to school in person, except one other option that we've been looking at is the home hospital option. I think that's the next slide, Sandra. Yeah. Carlson Home Hospital School is the one with LA Unified. There are, I think Carlson deals with almost all the districts, but anyway, traditionally a home hospital school program has been for students who have temporary disabilities, like if they broke their leg and can't attend school, or if they were going through some kind of medical treatment and can't attend school. It wasn't meant to be a long-term option. They all have end dates. But what traditionally Carlson had provided is 1 hour a day of a teacher in home until the pandemic happened. And then they were providing 1 hour a day of a teacher virtually for students. Not enough of a education really to keep up with the core curriculum if you have a child on core curriculum, as far as I'm concerned. But one of the things that's kind of interesting is that under the IDEA, one of the placement options can be home. So if a child can't attend school for whatever reason, an IEP team can make that child's placement home. However, I have yet to see a school district that understands that. And they almost always, they say home hospital limited to 5 hours a week, and that's it. What is required though is to hold an IEP, determine if the child's going to get their services and how those services are going to be delivered, in addition to the 1 hour a week of the teacher. I've only seen one school district provide a student with a home placement where that student was getting all of their services in home. So it's kind of interesting to see how they're sort of morphing Carlson to sort of fit the situation. And what I've heard now is if you choose to go to a group setting, Carlson is providing teaching 2.5 hours a day in a group setting with the same age students. And they are supposed to be having special education classes as well. This is all news to us. And so I don't know what it's going to look like yet. Have you gotten any more information, David?
The one thing I do know, which I think a lot of people were unsure about, is that they do seem to be offering alternative curriculum classes as part of this. And so I think a lot of people had a question. Schools were telling people that there wasn't alternate curriculum available on Carlson, but it appears that there are alternate curriculum classes. So that's the only thing I've heard recently.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm going to take a few minutes. Just some people just came in after we made the announcement. They don't know how to go to listen in Spanish. So,
okay.
Para los que acaban de entrar y necesitan interpretación en español, por favor miren ya sea en su tableta o en su computadora. Abajo van a ver el símbolo como de un mundo. Y ahí van y ahí escogen el idioma español para escuchar en español. And if you came in later also and are looking to listen to the presentation in English, you can also select the world symbol at the bottom of your screen or somewhere on your device to listen to the presentation in English. Thank you.
Okay. Go to the next slide, Sandra, please. Okay, so we've probably already touched on all these, that the placement should be placed by the IEP team. You have to have a doctor fill out a form recommending home hospital placement. And if you are going to do that, the doctor needs to put an end date on the form. Otherwise, the IEP team won't approve it and Carlson won't approve it. So if that's the case and you think it's going to be through till the end of the school year, put the last day of the school year on as the end date. You can always end it sooner, but they have to have a specific end date in order for Carlson to get on board. Okay, so curriculum is available. So we may be able to access behavior support services and other supplemental supports and services more readily through Carlson than through City of Angels. But honestly, this is all new and it remains to be seen. And I have so many clients whose children are out of school right now because they haven't had an IEP yet. the school's already started and they don't have a placement. So I'm just telling my clients to just make sure you note every day to the school, if they are calling to tell you your child's been absent, that your child doesn't have a placement and therefore they're not attending school, and that's the reason. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, so it appears, so this is just the general information about testing, which I think we were a little, I think a lot of people have probably already experienced this. So, you know, the schools are requiring the testing prior to returning, and weekly testing on a rotating schedule, and they're requiring that you use the app to say that, you know, you're symptom free. They also, so the daily pass, I think, is the next slide discuss accommodations about that? Okay, so, right, the school has to be willing to consider making accommodations to students who really can't wear a mask or have difficulty understanding why they need to be wearing a mask. Look, for a lot of students, whether or not they can consistently wear a mask, it's fine if they can try. That for most students who have difficulty, it's just a behavioral learning opportunity. The school should work with the students to minimize the difficulty and help them learn how to do it. Obviously, there are still going to be some students who just can't tolerate wearing a mask, and for those students, the district has to be willing to make reasonable accommodations. There's greater challenges with exemptions to testing. You know, they have made accommodations about the ways in which you can receive testing. They have, instead of the nasal, they also have, you know, inside your cheek available for some students. And then now they have, you can just spit. But some students are unable to tolerate any of those, and that's turning out to be a very difficult situation. So,
one of the things that's been problematic with the mask exemptions is that, like, I have one client where the school is telling the family that he can't come to school because he can't wear a mask, and the mom is saying he doesn't benefit from virtual schooling. So what do I do? And they told her that she could bring her son to school, but he was going to have to be separated from the other students, and likely he would be outside. Well, this child lives in the San Fernando Valley, and I don't know about you, but it was 103 at my house today. Not really safe to keep a child outside when they can't wear a mask and it's 103 degrees. Now, I've seen a lot of different situations and different schools providing different accommodations. So I'm happy to hear what any of you have to say about your experiences. Oh, this was, okay. This was the mask exemptions that was put forth by the Department of Public Health, which the school districts were not following. They were saying you either wear a mask or you don't come to school. And they were supposed to exempt persons that couldn't wear a mask because of their disability. That was one of the reasons. But if you look at the LA Unified mask exemption, it says the only reason is if you have a respiratory problem. That's the only way that you can get a mask exemption. So I haven't heard anything otherwise. I'm happy to hear what you all have to say. David, have you heard anything other than respiratory accommodation? You're muted. I can't hear you.
I haven't, but I think if you can make for respiratory in the broadest sense, I mean, I think that if students have significant enough health needs that it's possible that they would have an obligation to provide an exemption, but it's definitely on a case-by-case basis, and it definitely depends on who you're working with, how flexible the school personnel are.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sandra, could you go to the next one? Oh, wait. I think here is just a link to the exemption form process. They should provide you a form for exemptions at the school. Also, some information about how to file a complaint if they don't provide you with appropriate accommodations. The next one, I think we start talking about regression. So everyone has had an incredibly difficult 18 months where students have experienced a huge amount of psychological difficulty and learning challenges. And our students who have disability-based learning challenges have had it the worst. So LAUSD has, a lot of students have regressed. They've gone backwards in some areas of their functioning, whether it's behavioral functioning or their ability to attend to tasks, or how well they're speaking to peers in social situations. Many students have lost a lot. And so that's the concept of regression. Now, in normal times, when a student with an IEP is regressing rather than making progress, the thing to do is to file a complaint to seek compensatory education to help make up for the fact that the district was not providing a program that was appropriate enough or intensive enough to help the child make progress. The LAUSD has, they believe that, so you may hear this, they believe that the term compensatory services to make up for the regression of students somehow implies that they did something wrong, that it was the pandemic, and that, and that it wasn't the pandemic's fault. And so they've been calling it recoupment services. Regardless, we don't actually think it matters what you call it, but regardless, students need a lot of services. Some students need a lot of services to get, not just to get back to where they were, but to get back to the place that they would be if they'd been making steady progress throughout this entire distance learning program. And so, there's different ways to do this. I mean, the district is providing some additional instruction to try and help general education students catch up. Students can access that, but many of our students will also require specific, targeted, intensive, individualized intervention to help them catch up to where they were. Dina, you want to do the?
Yes, well, the next slide is good.
Yeah.
Right, and I've been telling parents this for the last year and a half. Documentation is essential to prove that your child has regressed. And one of the things that was came to light during this whole 18 months, 19 months, however far we are into it now, is that you as parents are sitting home with your children as they're accessing distance learning, and you see things that are going on with your child that the teachers are not seeing, which puts you in a unique position, because usually it's the teachers that are seeing your child, but you were seeing what was going on at home. So I have been telling parents it's really important to document when a child is not able to access their education and why. Was he not able to access it, or she not able to access it virtually? Were they having trouble with whatever they were having trouble with? It's very important for us when we move forward with a due process proceeding in order to get compensatory education for a student who's been struggling and denied appropriate educational support, that we have proof that the child has regressed. Now, you could look at prior assessments and new assessments now that the districts are holding and doing assessments in person again. So if you think that your child has definitely regressed, one of the things that you can do is ask them to do a new assessment so that you can compare previous with the new assessment. You can look at your child's progress on goals and objectives. Has the child met their goals and objectives? If not, why not? How far back are they? Did they meet any of the objectives? So you need to look at all of those things. And like I said, documentation of what services or supports were on the child's IEP and provided during distance learning, and what services and supports were not provided, indicating, you know, your child's ability to access those services. Those are really important questions that we would be asking our clients to provide us with that information. And also keeping in mind, if there were services that the districts could have provided to your child but didn't, that's going to be important too in terms of measuring compensatory education. Okay, next slide. Okay, some of this legislation. Okay, so SB 130 is the one that was passed that says the districts no longer have distance learning, they have independent study, and it leaves it up to the districts to decide how they're going to implement that. And so, like we said before, every district is doing it a little bit differently. And I've heard a whole bunch of different things. One of the things I've heard lately is that a district was requiring a family to sign a settlement agreement waiving their child's IEP rights in order to go and access independent study. Not okay. So definitely not okay. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that independent study is an option, but it's certainly the bigger problem with SB 130 is it fails to address at all students with disabilities and IEPs. So we really don't know, you know, what the requirement is with regard to that. But I think that what is very important to know, and from basic law school 101, is that the federal law always controls over the state law. But in this strange time, we're dealing with federal law, state law, and county health department regulations. So it's obviously it's a very different time, but I think it's important to keep in mind that kids with disabilities who are eligible for special education have very specific rights, and the districts have very specific responsibilities. And I think it's really important to hold the districts to those responsibilities for your child. The AB 967 was to provide, this was the one to provide alternative dispute resolution to prevent and intervene in early conflicts to hopefully resolve disputes without having to go to due process. So I've heard a lot of different things with regard to what they're calling ADR, alternative dispute resolution. And one of the things that I'm seeing with LA Unified is that they are handling them the same way as informal dispute resolutions, where they're giving the families settlement agreement with a waiver of all kinds of claims. And I don't recommend that any client signs those without getting legal opinion as to what they're signing, because basically they're asking you to give up your rights to your child's basically giving up your right to complain about your child's education up to the time of that agreement, which is what we usually see. So this is going to be an interesting one to see what happens.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's important to recognize if the school asks you, if you disagree with what they're offering and the school asks you, would you like to do informal dispute resolution or alternative dispute resolution, you're going to be working with a person who has a huge amount of knowledge and sophistication about how special education works, and they're going to offer you as little as possible. So when people bring in the offers that they get from the district when they have IDRs, the offer of settlement from the district, or ADRs, alternative dispute resolutions, they tend to be very, very small amounts of services. Not at all what you would be able to get likely if you showed the same, you know, if you met with an attorney and tried to have an attorney seek additional services for you. So there's two problems. One is that the offers tend to not be particularly good. And the other problem is that as Dina was saying, they ask you to sign a waiver, taking away your right to complain about things that the district has done that you may not know about, as you may not understand everything that you're signing for. Part of it, it's normal. If you have an attorney and you reach a resolution with the school district, they're going to say, we're going to give you the, speech, and we're going to give you this, and we'll give you an aid, whatever they give you in the agreement. And you're going to give them a waiver of rights, saying that, okay, you're going to give me my child these services, and then I will agree that everything that happened from today backwards is settled. We've resolved that issue. That's what schools want. That's what you give them when you reach a settlement agreement. So that's normal. But working on an agreement that can have that kind of effect without showing it to someone who is an attorney or knows the law is very dangerous. So I think is that our?
No, I think there's AB 104. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. This one was another one that bugged me. Okay, so AB 104 required the districts to notify parents that they could request that their child be retained only for the 21-22 school year, could request that they be retained if their grades were deficient for at least half of their coursework during the 2020-2021 school year. It's totally silent as to students on the alternative curriculum. And I've had a couple of cases where I've requested that students be retained and they've been denied. So I am in due process on some of those cases. I don't know what's going on with our legislature in California, but they tend to forget about kids with disabilities. So I think that any opportunity that families have to contest this, any law that comes out that is not considering the rights of students with disabilities, parents need to contact their legislators because this happens all too frequently. And I was doing something with Valerie the other day, Valerie Vanaman, and she was telling parents, you definitely need to contact your legislators and try to get in front of them so that they know there's a whole group of kids that they're passing over and not considering. So I think that's really important. Did you have anything to add on that, David?
No, I agree. I think that's right on.
Okay, so that was a very quick rundown of things that are going on. One of the things that I didn't include in the slides was a little bit of information about vaccination. And I'm not really clear on what districts are doing with regard to parents who are claiming an exemption for vaccines and claiming that exemption for COVID vaccine. Do you know, David?
That they're providing, I don't believe it's that they've, luckily most students are under 12, so it's not an issue yet. I don't think that they've mandated it yet, and I think that will obviously be a much more involved and controversial issue than masks. But I think we'll have to see, because I think you're probably right that may be something that's coming. It's already been implemented for teachers, so we'll see.
And the fight that we've been seeing just in the general public over whether to mandate vaccines is going to be taken into the school system, obviously. And so, parents of kids with disabilities need to be heard. Whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, you need to be heard so that our kids can be considered when they're coming up with this legislation or any mandates. So I think that's really important. And I'm sure that you all have a ton of questions, so we're happy to take them. Except I don't know how to do that.
We're gonna try to read the ones in Spanish.
Okay.
And see if we can get, let's see, we talked about that you guys, when we read it in Spanish, you guys will switch to the little the world symbol to, what was it, Fatima? To English or Spanish.
I don't know how to do that.
I have.
At the bottom, interpret.